any increase in blood flow is also going to increase lymph flow, and working with bigger areas. Normally we tend to see them. We think lymph nodes here and then under the armpits and in the inner thigh are kind of the big major areas if we're doing kind of lymphatic massage. But increasing circulation, releasing tension in the muscles, of course, you're going to see an uptick in lymph flow.
I gotta get myself a little more faith, a little more love.
I'm your host, Krista Bigler, and I'm going to guess we have at least one thing in common, that we're both in pursuit of a less stressed life. On this show, I'll be interviewing experts and sharing clinical pearls from my years of practice to support high-performing, health-savvy women in pursuit of abundance and a less stressed life. One of my beliefs is that we always have options for getting the results we want, so let's see what's out there together. Today on The Less Stressed Life, I have Dr. Tom Ingegno, who is, I hope I said it right.
Perfect. It's perfect. It's beautiful. Perfect. You did it better than 90% of the other hosts I've been on. You're already winning.
Love it. Love it. He's a clinician, a speaker, and best-selling author of The Cupping Book, Unlocking the Secrets of Ancient Healing. Dr. Tom has taught at 2 universities of East Asian medicine, served as a chair. Other things, he owns and operates Charm City Integrative Health, which provides a multidimensional approach to reducing inflammation, improving circulation, and regulating the immune system to help people thrive. His professional passion is to help patients and like-minded practitioners develop no-nonsense practices to allow people to maximize their health. And I love that statement. So welcome to the show, Dr. Tom.
Oh, thank you. I know this is going to be a good one.
Yes, I know too. I was telling him off air that we get a lot of pitches, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not that good. And I like cupping as part of our family culture. And I've never obviously interviewed someone on cupping because it's a specialty item, but so good. And honestly, it's time for a specialist on cupping. It's time for a cupping book. And so I was already sold, but then I opened up an interview and he's got a great beard. So here we are. It was an instant yes.
Thank God something's helping me out with my looks.
Let's get that beard on this video.
I feel like I should have gone to the barber and got it trimmed beforehand. I knew this was going to be a focal point here.
I have no judgments or any. I've got nothing to compare it to. It's a great.
Okay. All right. I feel like my headshot, though, it was a little bit more robust. I cleaned it up a little.
As we all do sometimes.
Well,
it's funny to me that I've been using the same headshot for the podcast cover art since 2017, which is quite a while ago. And I've tried to retake it. It didn't look as good on the 2 retakes we tried. I didn't like it as well. And so we didn't replace it. And so I literally run into people and I'll be trying to share my podcast. I went to a conference recently. I tried to share my podcast. And this lady said, "Oh, I listened to this podcast." I'm like, "That's my face on that podcast." I'm like, do I look that different? So anyway, we'll clean up.
I saw an AI app that's supposed to give you a really good headshot. So you put whatever photo up you want, and it just makes you look like a completely different person. And
no one knows who the hell you are.
And then no one knows who the hell you are anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So what is fun? You are a doctor of, I don't want to butcher it.
Yeah. So technically the degree and my field, look, there's about 10 different master's degrees and there's about 8 different doctorates. And that's some internal conflict we're trying to work out. But technically the doctorate is in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. Now that's funny to me because I do Chinese herbal medicine and a lot of the practices that they all originated in China, but the style of acupuncture I practice is Japanese. So it's like the letters don't even, it gets that niche. It gets down to like family systems and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, for most patients, when you get acupuncture, I lay down, they put needles in me, I leave, I feel better. And that's like the overview that we want, but it gets very stylized. It gets very opinionated and it gets very like, we'll take swings at each other in public. And I'm like, no other medical field does that. Just save that for the back room. You don't argue about stylistic stuff. But we're catty.
I'm just wondering how you got into this field. Did you go on a trip to?
No, anytime I went to Asia, it was on vacation, to be honest. And to tell you the truth, a lot of people that come back with like a little diploma on the wall that's in Chinese, they probably were there for 2 weeks. They saw the Great Wall. They went to a hospital once. Oh, great. Now I'm already swinging at people. No, I was set to be an MD. That was like where I thought I was supposed to go. And just there are a bunch of really random things that I know only make sense in retrospect.
Mhm.
Events in my life, it was pushing me towards something else. I always wanted to help people. And I thought, no, you got to be a doctor to do that.
Mm.
And well, there's thousands of professions that help people. Yeah, yeah. And between my grandfather, who was a pharmacist, who I remember counting out pills and him being frustrated with the cost. And this was back in 94 for somebody that was
Mm.
just getting cash at the end of a day. And this guy has a family to feed and he's paying this much for medicine. And he said something like, I know there's a better way. You got to find it. And that kind of got stored in somewhere in my memory. Then I was pre-med in college and I took an Asian philosophy course and a Tai Chi course, and that kind of warped my mind a little bit. And then the kicker was intercession in my junior year. I got a postcard in the mail from an acupuncture school for an open house. And I went and I came home with the paperwork and I filled it out. Less than 2 weeks later, I was enrolled
Mm.
and never looked back. It was
Had you ever had acupuncture before that?
no, isn't that crazy? Like the first experience, I was a student and it was fucking horrible. Oh, can I curse? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead. You already know.
I'm
No
sorry.
big deal.
You're gonna get the true me.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to tell me to pump the brakes on the F word at some point. But
You're
within
East
that,
Coast. It's
yeah,
more
very,
busted,
very
it's all
true.
part of it.
My first experience, it wasn't the student practitioner. It was the situation, right? The AC had broken. It was August. Our school was over a pretty major road. They had fans in the room until we get it cooler. But here I am laying on the typical massage table with only paper on it. I'm sweating through that. The window in the room is open and it's over this highway that these trucks are just blowing through. So here I'm getting diesel fumes. The guy keeps putting in needles and he was good. He was a great practitioner. I wish I remembered his name. But I'm sitting there in a pool of my own sweat going, oh shit, what did I just sign up for?
Reasonably.
And then I met my mentor and I had one of his students treat me and it was a completely like magical experience. And it was just, oh my God, this hit so many different parts of me. It wasn't just the physical stuff. I was so relaxed. I was so calm. For certain people, like not everybody, but they'll feel things with the needles in and not in a very unpleasant sense, but warmth and movement and all these kind of things were happening. And oh my God, I don't even know how to describe it. It was that thing that I think we're looking for. We call it chi, we call it energy. And really, because we don't have a better explanation for it. We studied acupuncture so much. We know all these methods of action. And then there's something that's like less tangible, you can't measure it. That happens. And that's the magical part. And I don't like dressing it up. I'm not too wishy-washy. I'm not too woo, but there is just something that like, and I think it speaks to our core humanity that it keeps me engaged and involved and in love with the medicine.
Another tagline for you could be acupuncturist for non-woo people, which I feel is like a bridge because you were describing, you were like, oh, I had this magical experience.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to elaborate. And you already said a little bit like you had these kind of like very calm, peaceful feelings. And I think something I'm really interested in, but working on how do you make this sexy and marketable in a positive way, because it's really about reaching people who need things the most, right? Because if you come in with all your acupuncture lingo, you're only going to appeal to people who already understand. So when you come in, so I was thinking about how disconnected we can be.
Yeah.
I have this one client who's doing a beautiful job describing this to me right now. She's like, yeah, my head and my body have just been super disconnected for so long. I just didn't even realize it. And so this is helping me reconnect. I'm starting to see a difference. And so I'm just curious about how that was maybe at play for you, or even that first magical experience. Like what else? So we're at peace.
Yeah.
Calmness, anything else that came?
Yeah. Yeah. Just these weird sensations, right? It doesn't feel neurological. It doesn't feel muscular. It's an awareness. Some people will say, even on the table, they'll say, I feel something, but I don't know the words to describe it. And sometimes it's, you put the needle here, but I feel it here, right? And look at the chart. Oh, that's the channel. And that's exactly where it goes. And you're really on the money with using the lingo, right? The system is so eloquent. It's such a beautiful way to describe changes that we couldn't measure back then, that we didn't have x-rays and we didn't have blood work and these kind of things. They developed this system that it talks about the cascade of effects that happen physiologically during acupuncture. But when we use that lingo, especially here in the West, people's eyes glaze over. They're just like, I have no idea what the hell this guy's talking about.
Yeah.
So when we talk a little bit more Western, when we put it in terms that are more marketable, I hate using that word with medicine, but that's what we have to do. You have to
Right.
sell
How do
the
you
thing to
appeal to the-
people.
Yeah. How do you
Yeah, you know?
appeal to the person who needs it the most? That's
Yeah.
my thing. It's like the integrity is there. It's really, let me connect you to this thing that will make your life 100% better.
Yeah.
And that's my interest. And so I'm always, this is what I think about behind the windshield. It's like, I want to make that like more resonant because and part of it is because I was that person. I wonder if that you're able to, I would imagine, touch more very masculine looking men with beards who wouldn't necessarily go to.
I am the softest dude over 200 pounds.
Mhm.
Swear to God, I'm like, people look at me and I'm like, no, I'm not that guy. I'm somebody else.
You can make this accessible because
Yeah.
whether we like it or not, we have a natural bias or judgment toward people who look like us. So when you've got another man, a manly man in the room, it's now you're able to.
Yeah, I feel like you're trying to compliment me here, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with.
It's okay. Don't overthink it. Don't overthink. I do want you to make. We're gonna get into cupping stuff. I have this bias that I think that a lot of great modalities and medicine are borrowed from Chinese or Asian.
I would
practices.
100% agree with that, and even functional medicine has roots in East Asian medicine.
Totally.
So yeah,
totally. Most herbalism, right? Love for you to in this vein, literally of making this sexy. Let's make acupuncture sexy first. We're gonna generally talk about cupping, but let's make acupuncture sexy first. Tell me by telling us about results that you've seen from acupuncture, because that's the most sexy thing you can do.
Yeah, I think it's something that if somebody comes in for a condition, this is one of those things. One, you have to preface all that with this is a therapy, right? It's not a magic bullet. It's not a surgery. It's not a magic pill. You're not going to do it once. But that's like having a salad and wondering why you're not feeling healthier. Yeah. Oh, you had that salad the other day.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's great. Did you move your body? Did you wash that salad down with 32-ounce Coke? Yeah. So you have to look at it in its whole thing. And I mentioned humanity before. And one of my favorite expressions from the Yellow Emperor's Internal Classic, what we call like our acupuncture Bible, is acupuncture is an expression of humanity, right? So we don't separate things out, right? Like psychology is different than the rest of medicine. Because our thoughts and our brain, we know that affects everything else, but we don't treat it like that. I had a dentist once say that the rest of medicine doesn't think teeth are part of the head. Yeah, and I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. And if we look at it, something natural like childbirth, that's a medical condition. Yeah, it's the way we package things. So Chinese medicine, East Asian medicine is probably a better term for it because yes, it originated in China, but as it spread and during different time frames, it evolved and changed and met the people there. But that we say acupuncture is the expression of humanity is the phrase I was trying to get back to. And it looks at a whole picture. It's the 5,000-foot view of a person, right? So you come in and you say, oh, this hurts here. And then we start going, how are you sleeping? Why do you want to know how I'm sleeping? Because I have a hunch that you're waking up between 1 and 3 a.m. And then they're like, how the hell did you know that? And so we're talking about the liver channel. You're talking about this pain in the subcostal area. And you mentioned how frustrated you were and the energy of the emotional component of the liver is anger, it's frustration. So you've basically told me all this stuff. And then you go and you put one needle in and they're like, wow, that rib pain's gone. Yeah. And it's like, how did you know that? And if you look at it from the outside without that system, it looks unscientific. It looks magical. But you have thousands and thousands of years of case studies. And look, we're not hanging any diagnosis on one symptom, but what we see are these patterns and they keep emerging. And then you multiply that by 3,000 years and millions of treatments. And you come up with this really nuanced system that somebody said something to me today. And I'm like, wow, you said that one thing. So I'm going to choose this point. And she goes, how the hell did you know that? It's you say this one thing and this controls the opening of the eyes. And you said you feel like you can't open your eyes. And then she listed off 4 other symptoms that were like, wow, that changed. This got better and that got better. And I'm like, wow, that was like, I could have just done that one needle and not wasted the other 10. But those are the things, right? It's not this big things that impress me or when I'm surprised too. That still happens after 23 years of clinical experience. So you're like, I didn't think that was going to do that. That's amazing.
Mhm.
I had a patient, this sounds so crazy. We do a technique called moxibustion. That's an herb that we burn on the surface of the skin, right? It's mugwort, grows everywhere around the world. I believe it was like put here for a reason. A woman came in, she said, I have a sty in my eye. And I go, look, I get really good results with this. We burn just on this knuckle, on the index finger, on that knuckle, we burn a little bit of moxa. And I go, normally that sty will resolve in 2 days. She called me 15 minutes after she left the office. She goes, I had to pull over because something was in my eye. And I go, okay. And I'm going, oh my God, did I somehow get a needle? Like I'm freaking out. Like I'm always like crisis management. I did something wrong. She goes, the sty popped and completely drained. And I go, that's atypical. But like when we see those things, and one of my favorite things to treat, talking about moxibustion, is breech birth. There are studies to show that like we have a 70% success rate in flipping a baby that's breech. And that's up to
So
week
fun.
38. And you're like, not only am I doing something to another human being at that point, right? Because that fetus can live on its own. It's affecting a different person at that point, right? So that baby turns and normally within 2 to 3 sessions. So we might see him 2 or 3 times that week. And we're getting 70% success rates. And my clinic has the same rate as the study. It's so amazing to me. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's a dangerous conversation for me because then it makes me want to go get a doctorate of acupuncture because I just love
I've had 5 people over the years go to acupuncture school because of me. And in my head, my self-worth is like, oh, they think they can probably do better than me.
I was attracted to what I really hear in the way you describe this is
Yeah.
there's a listening skill, which we all need to
Yeah.
beautifully. But I just am obsessed with pattern recognition. And
Yeah.
so when you're describing how you would recognize issues with the liver, I'm like, oh yes. Like in the clients that I feel are most
Yeah.
like me, I'm like, oh yeah, you have like congestion in your liver. It's
Mhm.
probably anger. You probably aren't thinking it's anger. So I have this conversation with people pretty frequently. So I was on the same wavelength with you there. I really want to know what the hell's going on with the index finger that creates that sty. Like what's the relationship actually?
So that's funny because that comes from a very niche Japanese system of moxibustion. That's like an extra little, hey, somebody
Weirdness.
figured out. But you said something, and I have to mention it because it is so, the word that we use when we're taking the pulses, this is one of the ways that we diagnose, right? We feel 6 different positions on the radial pulse. Each one of those positions gets assigned to one of those 12 channels. We use the word ting in Chinese, and that's listening. We listen to the pulse. Not only are we listening to the answer to the questions, but we're listening when we feel the pulse. And it is so amazing. You're absolutely right. This is just pattern recognition. And I think that's why me as an ADHD person is still in it, because there's always another layer. There's always something else that I can glean. And I don't think I'm God's gift to acupuncture, but I've been doing it long enough where people are starting to show me some respect in my field. And when they ask me things, I'm like, oh yeah, do this. And they're like, why? And you're like, oh, did you notice that like they wiped here and it's this channel? And they're like, but they didn't mention that at all. I'm like, yeah, but you took their pulse and you press here and they go, ow. And she goes, yeah, how'd you know that? And it's, you do the same thing over and over again. And each time you do it, you polish that jewel, right?
Yeah.
You're refining that. And it happens so slowly that you don't notice. Like every 5 years or so, I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have figured that out 5 years ago. And it is so beautiful.
Yeah. And I feel like the way you describe this would be so attractive if you were a medical doctor or a provider. It would be so fun to have this in your toolbox. So it makes sense that you were led toward that. And then you had this kind of almost divine intervention that landed you over here. But I can see where every once in a while, I think that there is that combination of people with an arm of acupuncture in their practice. I do think that acupuncture has been around long enough where it's got some real, you would know 100% better than I would. So you might be able to say, I think it shows up in mainstream every once in a while.
The scene has changed a lot in the time I've been practicing, right? A lot of the research that was being done originally, and this is a fun fact, PTs and chiros don't like it when I say it, but we have more systematic reviews in the Cochrane database than physical therapy and chiropractic put together. Now, the bulk majority of the studies that were originally done were trying to disprove acupuncture. And they get to the end of the study and they're like, oh crap, they used some weird terms, but what they're saying is actually happening. And it doesn't matter if it's a neurological condition, an autoimmune condition, a musculoskeletal condition, a respiratory condition. Hell, there's been studies that show that we can treat AFib. Now, I'm not going to make that claim in my clinic, but like, how are we putting a needle in your body and altering those nerve fibers, those progencin fibers in the middle of the heart? How are we doing that? And I don't have the answer to that. It's still pretty amazing to me.
As well as I do. I think that all things, I don't know, maybe you feel differently.
Mhm.
In physical therapy, there's a lot of tools that have
Yeah.
been borrowed from
We use the word
scraping.
appropriation on our side.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, is that Graston's, right? Yeah. So Chinese grandmothers for 5,000 years have been doing that with a soup spoon. That's not new. That's
Yeah.
not new. But yeah, it's not even about taking swings at it. For me, it's not
helping
even.
people.
Yeah, it's not even dry needling versus acupuncture, because
Yeah.
I think dry needling is, in my personal opinion, it's undereducated acupuncture. It's lowbrow acupuncture, which will probably get some hate mail. You can forward them to my website. It's not giving respect to where it came from, and then it's saying we want the same results. And when we look at those studies, they're not getting the same results, which is interesting. And in my head, it's because you don't understand the system and the framework, right? You're looking for the quick fix. Point and shoot works, but not as well as a robust system. So it's for me, and this was something my mentor beat into my head. You got to live the lifestyle. You got to live and breathe this. You got to be passionate about it. And it's going to manifest differently in me than it did in him. But that's part of keeping the practice alive and having that cultivation on your own end, right? You can't just show up in the room and expect to be good at it, right? You have to constantly refine.
And through those clinicians, I was exposed to cupping, exposed to dry needling, and actually mostly through my husband, who he doesn't come up.
Is he a
too
PT?
often.
And I'm just crapping on physical
He's
therapy.
not. He
Okay,
has a
sorry.
labor intensive. One of my really good friends is a PT, but
And I
my
don't
husband-
I refer to them all the time.
You're great. And very early in my dietetics education, there was a chiropractor who suggested I go to essentially an applied kinesiology course.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it was not my vibe, but I took from that. This has roots in Eastern and Asian medicine. And actually, I get a little bit, to your point, sometimes I get people who come on who have this proprietary system quite frequently. And sometimes I dig for the.
Don't you love that?
I dig for the.
Do you want me to
source of
say
this.
it? No, nothing's new.
Yeah. And sometimes the credit is not given. Now,
Yeah.
on a more positive note, I had this lovely person once come on. Another time, I don't know, I'm sure you could talk about this. I would love to do tongue geography a different way.
Yeah.
I had someone come on about face reading.
I was actually listening to that podcast. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
She has this like lovely demeanor. She did a face reading for me. And what I appreciated about that, which was something you mentioned earlier, was essentially their research was just compilation of all the same things they had seen. And I couldn't agree with that more. That's like basically my life and my practice. I'm like,
Yeah.
I've just seen that this is always this. So we're going to go ahead and treat this and it's probably going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that is when we talk about evidence-based medicine, right?
Yeah.
They always put that up with 3 circles in a Venn diagram. And one of them
Yes.
is clinical research. And everyone holds that as the golden idol, right? Those double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized human trials, right? That's what we want. But those other 2 circles are, what does the patient want, right? That needs to be part of it, right? If you're like, hey, Tom, you have this horrible cancer, we can do surgery, but you're probably going to die. Then it's, do I really want this? Do I need to go through that surgery? And then the last bit is the practitioner's knowledge and experience, right? So this is why, and I think I've lectured to a few med students recently in the last couple of years, like the schools have had me out. And the idea is they don't like the system they're working in, right? They want more natural things. They want to be able to say, I know this is good for this, so you need to go here, right? They want to quarterback it. They want to run it, but they want to know that like when somebody comes in with MS, yes, we're going to give them our drugs. We're going to run our tests. We're going to do our things. But can I send them to acupuncture? Can I send them here? Can I recommend herbs to them? Can I at least put them in that right corridor? And I think that's a great thing because until the medical system finally crumbles and needs to be rebuilt from the ashes, which I don't know if that's happening in my lifetime, There's too much money.
I thought that was going to happen already,
I
but
keep
guess
waiting
it
for
didn't
things to
happen.
fall apart. People told me things were going to fall apart. They haven't fallen apart yet.
Yeah.
But at least the knowledge is there, right? And they're not pretending like they don't see it anymore,
Mhm.
right? And even when they're appropriating things, like they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right? You're doing a bad job at it, but okay, we see that you see value in it.
I didn't know that my retirement job was going to be acupuncture. Thanks, Tom.
Oh, if you ever want to apply to schools, let me know. I'll tell you that they're all horrible.
Okay. Fantastic. Look forward to Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about you've written this book called
Yeah.
The Cupping Book. And this is not new to me, although I was flipping through it, reading bits and parts of it, which I love the length of it. I love the pictures. It's
That was
specific.
intentional. It was
I'm-
meant to be a quick read.
I might be able to get my husband to actually read it. He's not a reader, but he loves cupping. And actually, on this
Mhm.
note, he was the one. I didn't visit a chiropractor my entire life. It wasn't part of my upbringing, but I met my husband. He was like very pro chiropractor. Actually, now he's very pro physical therapy and dry needling because that's what I have access to. where I live,
Yeah.
That we do not have an acupuncturist. And so, anyway, somewhere
I
along
don't
the
even know
lines,
if you have a state organization. I don't even know if you have licensure.
dry
I would have to
needling
look.
just happened a few years ago here,
Mhm.
actually.
Yeah.
And so, one of the earliest credentialed physical therapists was one of his physical therapists. So
Okay.
anyway, so he got into that. He loves that now. He loves doing the in between restoration book, or the restoration work. But I was looking at your book and it said that I was feeling a bit old when I read it and saw that in the 2012 Olympics was when cupping, I remember this as well,
Yeah.
became a thing because Michael Phelps was showing up, the swimmer, which I think everyone listening to this podcast knows what I'm talking about, is on the same page as us.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, 2012, geez. But anyway, I had a child born that year, so I remember all the details. It just feels like a long time ago. So that's when I think cupping really became I felt it became mainstream. I think my husband was exposed to it maybe at a massage, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But he's been a very avid cupper over the years, and my kids are older now. But when they were in younger elementary school, the school called us to make sure everything was okay because they had cupping bruises. And in fact, there was once upon a time, I'm in a tiny little town. We have an NFL player from here. But one time when he was in high school, he was in our living room and my husband was cupping him and he was able to go play in the state basketball tournament and whatnot. So like cupping is not an unfamiliar thing in our household. And I don't know if anyone would cringe at that, but somehow someone told my husband, you can just do this at home. And he's always covered in cupping.
It is. And honestly, it came to Chinese medicine. It's not even Chinese in origin. There was a physician in about the 300 ADs who wrote in his memoirs and his medical texts that like, we know that this is being done in homes. This is folk medicine. It's not beneath us. We really should be doing it as practitioners. Right. So I always find it funny when you even mentioned the Olympics there, because the next day when Michael Phelps had the marks, ABC, the local ABC was in my office doing a recording on it. But it's so funny to me because traditionally we're using fire cupping, right? We're using glass cups with an open flame to eat the oxygen and create that vacuum. And now we don't need to. So when I see other practitioners using the gun with the plastic cups, I'm like, that's the home version. You could play with fire. You're allowed to. But it's so funny where I'm assuming you don't have a plethora of Asian markets and things like that to go to. But by us, I can go into there's a chain called H Mart. It's great. I can walk down the health and wellness aisle and pick up 2 or 3 different kits right there. The other reason I wrote the book was really because this isn't one culture, right? This is something that everybody should be doing at home, right? This is one more tool in your toolkit before you have to go see the doctor or the physician or seek more intense treatment. But within that, like, this was part of everybody's culture. Everybody's grandmother used to do this at one point. So why not respect that? Why not have some traditional experience that is backed by modern science and research and that is so easy and safe? And I see you playing with one of the silicone cups now. Those are some of my favorites because I can't break them. I can clean them with whatever the hell I want. They're not going to get broken down. And those will last a lifetime as long as you're not chewing on them.
Yeah. They're fun to play with.
They're so much fun to play with. And
They're kind of like
honestly,
a fidget toy.
double and triple up on uses for everything.
Let's get into the 101 of cupping.
Yeah.
If someone's not really familiar with it, like and what I was intrigued by going through your book was some of the uses, because for me, this is my interpretation of cupping, is that it's bringing blood flow to the surface. And so when you have more circulation, you're healing faster. And so it was really for soreness.
And that's the number one use. Yeah.
Okay.
So
go over the 101.
Yeah. So the cool thing is, you mentioned blood flow to the surface, right? So when we put the cup on, we're pulling the skin away from the fascia, away from the muscle. So we have those 3 layers that we're creating this space. Now, the surface, you basically get a hickey, right? The capillaries burst and you're causing that redness, the mark, the bruise is caused by those capillaries breaking. But the real magic happens at those lower, I'm saying magic a lot today. Real benefit happens deeper in the tissue by creating that void, by creating that space between those different layers of tissue. We're allowing older, stagnant, quote unquote, stagnant blood to be pulled to the surface and pulling that into that interstitial space, and fresh blood, because it's a relatively closed system, fills in behind it, right? So we're getting inflammatory markers. We're getting metabolic waste out of the deeper tissue that may not be getting that circulation. Now, that's how it helps with the musculoskeletal stuff. But when we look at cupping's blood flow, the increased blood flow, it happens up to 6 inches deep in the body. So when you're mentioning other effects of cupping, in the book, we talk about respiratory disorders, we talk about digestive disorders. That's where we're seeing that, because we're increasing circulation, just not like if we do it on the abdomen, we're going to work the abs, right? Yes. But you're getting blood flow deeper into that tissue, into the intestines, which is really crazy, because we're doing something to the surface of the skin, but it has this effect, like I said, 6 inches into the body. So we can even treat the gut from the low back, because we can get it from both sides. Right? Now, one of the other things that happens, and this is one of my favorite uses, and this is actually why what my 11-year-old, when she treats me at home, she just does it for stress for me. We know that when we trigger one of those parasympathetic nervous system responses, that rest and digest response, as opposed to the sympathetic, the fight or flight, our vagus nerve, which everyone's talking about now, how do we get good vagal tone? How do we not get stuck in that fight or flight? But we know when we drop into that rest and digest, if we start breathing deeper and slower, especially on the exhale, if we get ourselves to think about food and we start like getting our stomach to rumble, we're starting to enter parasympathetic nervous system, right? So our brain doesn't tease out any of those specific functions. So if we start increasing circulation, that's another thing. Vasodilation is one of those triggers. All those other things start to fall into place. So she'll put cups up and down my back, and about 10 or 15 minutes later, I start to get a little sleepy. Maybe she does that just to calm me down. Maybe it's because she wants to eat a bunch of junk food or something, and I told her no before. But yeah, she'll do it to help me relax, and I just do it for stress relief.
I was wondering about cupping for stress relief, because I saw that as a heading in your book, and that's intriguing. So essentially, increasing circulation just naturally triggers the parasympathetic nervous. If you're urinating a lot when you're drinking water, maybe you're not actually hydrating that much, or in other words, getting the fluid and nutrients into the cell. Electrolytes are minerals that help fluid and nutrients get into the cell. I recommend all of my clients start by drinking electrolytes when we begin our work together to improve energy, and then we get even more strategic with our electrolyte recommendations as test results come in. Now, generally, electrolytes are potassium, sodium, and chloride. One of my favorite electrolyte products is Pickleball Cocktail from Jigsaw Health, because it's one of the only products you can get with an adequate dose of potassium to meet my recommendations, which is critical for blood sugar, which everyone should care about, hormone health, and digestion. Huge thing for relapsing digestive issues. Jigsaw Health is also maker of the famous adrenal cocktail, made popular by the pro-metabolic corner of the internet and Root Cause Protocol, as well as a multi-mineral electrolyte for recovery called Electrolyte Supreme. You can get a discount on all of Jigsaw's amazing products, including Pickleball, Electrolyte Supreme, and Adrenal Cocktail at jigsawhealth.com with the code LESSSTRESSED10. That's 3 S's, LESSSTRESSED10.
Yeah, and we do it with massage. We do it with gua sha scraping, Grastins. We do it with acupuncture. All of these things are really playing with that autonomic nervous system, vagal nerve tone, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same roots. But if you convince yourself you're relaxed in one area, it has that ripple effect across all other systems.
I think it's so important. I recall this client I had, a lovely client,
Mhm.
had found some sleep apnea while we were working together, would have occasional trouble falling asleep. But funny enough, he would get a massage and sleep like a baby. And
Yeah.
I was like, what do you think that this means for you? This is one of those disconnection pieces, right? Where that's interesting that happened. Yes, that is interesting that happened. That somatic, that touch overall. This is getting my kind of wheels turning a little bit. So I've got some specific questions related
Yeah,
to
go.
this.
Yeah, do it.
All right. So I'm thinking about the muscle soreness and I'm thinking about this flow of things. Do you
Mhm.
feel like there's just like a completely interwoven conversation with lymphatics when we're talking about?
Yeah, definitely, because we're in those areas, right? So we're not necessarily cupping right over lymph nodes, but any increase in blood flow is also going to increase lymph flow, and working with bigger areas. Normally, we tend to see them. We think lymph nodes here and then under the armpits and in the inner thigh are the, kind of the big major areas if we're doing kind of lymphatic massage. But increasing circulation, releasing tension in the muscles, of course, you're going to see an uptick in lymph flow. It's not as fast. I remember somebody describing the lymph as like the sewers, but
The ocean better or
yeah,
like
yeah, it's not just for garbage.
no.
Yeah, okay, but
Well
yeah,
said.
there's so many things that are happening there that when we treat systemically, and for lack of a better phrase, cupping's like probably like really horseshoes and hand grenades, right? We don't need to be exactly on an acupuncture point. We don't need to worry, oh, are we in the belly of this muscle? Right? You hit it. You can be a little bit more loose, a little bit more free form. So yeah, we work adductors, which is going to work. That's a little painful, but when you put the cups on the inner thigh, you're definitely hitting all those lymph pathways that are in there, and those tend to be pretty sluggish. And God, I remember doing self massage with that and digging your thumb in and just crying as you're doing it.
Yeah, I love talking about lymph here. And the lymph experts will say you got to start by opening the drain.
Yeah,
So I want to talk next about where not to cut. But before we go there, I want to understand chest congestion a little bit
yeah,
more and experiences you've had around this because this
yeah,
is
yeah.
very new idea to me. I never would have even thought about it around
The,
this, but I
the,
wonder, I'd love to hear if you have seen a lot of long COVID, coughing,
Mhm, mhm.
etc. Have you seen any support?
Yeah, yeah. Long COVID has been really such like a bane clinically now because
Mm,
somebody comes in with symptoms, right? I just had this conversation with a woman today. She goes, "Yeah, ever since I went through menopause, I'm starting to get this type of arthritis." And I said, "Hey, you went through menopause 2 years ago, and did you have COVID?" "Yeah, once." And I'm like, I can't even tell if this is straight menopausal symptoms or
I
it's
get it.
complicated by
I get
long-term
it.
COVID. And yeah, even my wife was having some weird, she described it as tachycardia, and I'm taking her pulse and I'm like, it isn't speeding up." She went to a cardiologist with a little like monitor with the
I think
button.
cardiologists are so busy right now.
And the first question they asked when they were screening her was, "When did you have COVID?"
Mhm.
Yeah, they didn't even say, "Did you have COVID?" It's like, "How long ago was it? 6 to 18 months ago?" Because this is what we're seeing, right? So the chronic chest congestion, it's funny because in my head, when I was an acupuncture student, that's what I knew it for. But that turns out to be a real Mediterranean thing. It's like the Italians and the Greeks, they do it for chest colds. They
Oh,
always have
really?
done it for chest colds.
So
You know,
you
when it
were
was
familiar with cupping
it,
before in
it
school?
was a weird thing, right? It was a weird thing in the back of my head. It wasn't something, we were very gentrified. I'm Thomas, not Gaetano. But it was known. It was something like I had other Italian friends that were like, "Yeah, no, I used to do that." Yeah, yeah.
What actually did it? Because
My grandmother personally, not that I know of. My great grandmother probably did.
oh,
But by
interesting.
the time I came to the scene, she was a little less mobile. Yeah. But within that, it was something that like you'd hear from variations on a theme of how you attach the cups depending on what culture it was. But if you go back and you watch The Godfather Part Two, and they're describing Fredo, right? He was the frail one, right? The youngest kid, I think. There's a scene where the grandmother is doing cupping on his chest specifically for, but she's got the little old school water glass, and you just see this little old lady leaning over a baby on the kitchen table, and I'm like, that's nailing Italian culture, right? That
Yeah,
is
when you were
it
talking
right
about
there.
this being pervasive in so many
Yeah.
cultures, I actually thought you meant all Asian culture.
No,
You
like
mean literally.
So I wish I had them here because water buffalo horns are like one of the traditional ones.
Ah,
And I called, there's only a few acupuncture distributors in the country, and I like harassed the one that's in North Carolina because they get me stuff super quick. And I know them well enough where I called them and I sent them a photo of sheep herders in Ethiopia. And they had these water buffalo horns up and down this one dude's back. And I literally said to the guy, Joey, can you please get me these? This looks so fucking metal. And he's like, all right, let me see if I can get them from our suppliers in China. And Joey didn't own the company, but he was like one of the higher ups. And he calls me back 2 hours later. I can get them, but we're only going to order samples. So they're going to cost a lot more than if we carried them. And I go, how much? And he goes, about $20 a piece. And I go, if that's landed, give me $100 worth and I'll go from there. And so I figured I'd get 5. And then he calls me back. He goes, you know what? I showed them to the owner, Barry, and Barry also thinks they're metal as fuck. So we're going to carry them. And he goes, now they're $9 a piece. I'm like, okay, so let's go with $100 worth. And he sent me all of them. Now, the problem is one of the things with the designs of the cups is you want a really wide edge because the buffalo horn, it's water buffalo. It's Asian water buffalo. They cut into you. They're fingernail material. It's very thin. And I put them on my dad and he was like, these hurt people. Why are you doing this? And I'm like, no, I did it to you. I can't share these cups. These are the family cups. Why? These are porous. I can't sterilize them. Yeah, we're not giving somebody else an infection because I wanted.
Maybe they were sanding the edges or something.
They do, but it's so thin. I really wanted to get bison. We used to have a bison farm here. I wanted to get the bison horns, but the pet market has them cornered. So anytime they butcher a bison, they're great for dogs that chew really hard, but their shell is their horn is much thicker.
Okay.
So I might have to go and buy a couple and sand them myself.
I'll have to go see what I can find laying around because I do occasionally drive by buffalo. I'll see what I can. I have to look into this. I'll have to look into this.
It's worldwide. Thousands of years ago, they were doing it, calling it ventosa. Even the Muslim faith, it's part of their religion. They call it hijama.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's everywhere. It might be
it just
Egyptian.
might look different.
And it looks how they apply the cups is just slight variation.
And
Normally
the type
classic
of cup, right?
and the design of the cup, everything. Yeah.
And maybe, and I think talking about where to not put them is important, but let's
Oh, yeah,
finish
definitely.
where to put them. And then actually, I like the concept of the cups look interesting. Now, in today's world, I saw in your book, there's red light cups. So you can really.
Yes. I'm a big fan of stacking. Actually, we do that at our clinic. Like we have people like run through a circuit of services. But I also think it's like the Swiss Army knife that's so bulky that it's not even a good knife anymore in some cases. So I have a whole bunch of those red light cups. I don't believe, right? So with the red light, the frequency is always the same, the wavelength, I should say. But the intensity, the output needs to be really high. We have red light therapy in our office. If you're going to get a treatment with the panel being anything less than on your surface of your skin. The red light in the cup is a little LED. You can't convince me that it's powerful enough to actually do it. Does it look cool? Yeah. Did I buy the $80 one? No. I went to China and just said, how much you selling these for? $20? Okay, I'll try them. It's cool because it's motorized. That's a cool function. You don't have to sit there and pump it yourself. The red light, it really isn't enough. Even the ones that heat up, I don't feel like they get hot enough to notice.
How many sets of cups do you have?
So when I wrote the book, I spent several $100s picking up like 1 or 2 odds and ends, like weird cups.
Not bad though.
It's not.
Tools.
No, and it's all a business write-off, but like the glass cups that we use clinically, God, I probably have a couple hundred at the office. Why? Because they're a pain in the ass to clean. And if it's busy and you're using like 10 to 15 on a patient, by the end of the day, you're cleaning 60 cups, 70 cups, and you're like, oh God,
Those are the OGs, but they're harder to use.
That's why I suggest leaving that to the professionals. 1, glass can break. 2, you have an open flame. And if you're not set up, if you're not trained how to do that, like the last thing I wanted somebody to do was read my book and burn their house down. No. Yeah, I can't imagine that lawsuit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What results have you seen with cupping the lungs?
Yeah.
You told me that the sty usually resolves 2 hours after this.
Days is normally what I say. That was just a fluke patient that was just way too eager to be my favorite patient. But yeah, I had, and this was funny because the first one was a Greek woman who came in and she had antibiotic resistant bronchitis. So she ran 2 courses and she goes, my grandmother would have done this at home. And I'm like, hang on, I'll go get the cups. And she goes, you do that? And I did it. She called me 3 days later saying she couldn't believe how much phlegm she was coughing up, which is everything went to productive, right? And it could have been, this is the weird thing, right? So when we increase circulation, we're increasing circulation of anything that's in the blood. Maybe we got the antibiotics to the lungs better. So I'm not saying it was me, but then I did it again a few months later to somebody else that had like walking pneumonia or something. And she goes, oh my God, I feel so much better. And it became productive. Increasing when East Asian medicine as a whole is really just trying to stimulate the body to do the thing that it's supposed to do anyway. Yeah. When we look at it, it's not about, we're not going to be able to turn somebody's metabolism up past what's normal, but regulating towards normal is what we can help do on both sides of that coin. Too much, too little, just right is what we're going for. So when we do it with cupping, that's what we'll see. And those are the really interesting things I've seen with cupping as like a, wow, I didn't even think that would work that well, is like when you do get an infection breaking up.
Totally. On the same note, you were
Yeah.
talking about treating gut from the low back. I think
Yeah.
about this. I've had a variety of guests, and I remember someone had a modality that was essentially, in my opinion, some kind of abdominal massage.
Yeah.
But what I liked about it was that she made such a valid point. Because when you're in fight or flight, your blood flow goes to your extremities to run from tiger. You
Yeah.
often, like when you live in that state, which we so often do when we're disconnected, especially, you're losing blood flow to the abdomen. And so that's going to impact your gut sometimes, but also hormone, fertility, et cetera, because
Absolutely.
all of that stuff is right there. So I feel like this is just another one of those modalities that can return blood flow to the central cavity. And which is
Absolutely.
ultimately only going to be positive, I think.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
the most part.
Yeah. You mentioned tongue diagnosis, right? Mapping out the tongue. The Japanese tend not to use that as much. Yes, they learn it in school. And part of the reason is in the 1600s, acupuncture was a vocation for blind people. So they would do abdominal diagnosis. So they map it out similar to the tongue. But when we press, we have what we call alarm points. We check, and that tells us the pathologies in the channel, the pathologies in the organ, these kind of things, and gives us some fundamental stuff. And as a Japanese practitioner, we do a lot of abdominal diagnosis and treatment. And you're absolutely right. Throughout history in Asia, there were a lot of systems. One was called the school of the middle in China, right? Why? If the gut isn't working, if we're not digesting, how are we going to get herbs in? How are we going to get medications in? Why? Because your body's not going to be able to do anything with it if that middle is not working. I'm sorry, I ran with that.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. I'm just thinking some other things that I think are maybe very important. Earlier, we were talking about emotions stored in organs like the liver, and I think you were using acupuncture for that.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know if I'm pretty positive the answer is yes. I see people having emotional release. They come out sometimes crying when you do acupuncture. Do you see that with cupping as well?
Yeah, you can, right? This is in that realm of somatic response, right? Where any reaction is good as long as it's not violent. So depending on what organ we're talking about, we have 12 channels, right? We don't put consciousness in the brain in Chinese medicine. It's local to the body, but it's not inherently in one organ. So we split up that's your intellect, our ability to speak and everything comes down to the spleen and stomach, which is our major digestion ones. So we talk about brain fog, whether it's with COVID or anything else. And we're like, oh, the spleen and stomach isn't working. Students, oh, their spleen is depleted. Why? They're studying too much. But within that, the main releases that we see, sometimes it's crying. Crying tends to be the most popular one. I've had people say I'm really angry and I don't know why. We go, oh, this must be liver. This must be the smooth flow of qi and blood throughout the body is what we say classically. But even laughing, even terrible sadness that isn't even crying, grief, they all come out. They're all indicative of a different organ. And it's just another thing to note, right? We don't hang our whole diagnosis on one sign or symptom, but we go, oh, that's interesting.
And it's powerful.
It is. And that experience, like, wow, I came in for something physical and I had this whole body release that became emotional, became psycho. And it's wow, because that's where it was stuck. It wasn't in the body. You felt it in the body.
Right. This is good when you have this kind of bait and switch, right? Or it's like came for pain, but I left with more.
It's funny because my mentor used to say this, look, they might be limping in and they want you to address their knee. You better address their damn knee. But when you're addressing their knee, you're treating everything else, right? Nothing's separated, right? We sometimes say ghost in the machine, right? That was Descartes. But like in Chinese medicine, in East Asian philosophy, no, we're this energy being that just becomes denser and denser until it has physical material, right? So you can't pull them apart, right? If I separate your spirit from your body, you're dead. So those two things are intimately connected. We even call that yin yang divorce when somebody's on their deathbed, right? Up, the physical and the non-manifest are separating.
Mhm.
Yeah, we treat the body from the spirit from the body. And why? Because it's the same thing. It's the same you.
Yeah. That's one of those things, the experience, seeing is believing stuff.
Yeah, you
Some
can't
earlier
convince
episodes
somebody
today.
that.
Yeah.
We've had people, you'll be working on them and all of a sudden they think about past traumas or they go, oh my God, I didn't realize this happened. I had one patient and I treated her once and she cried like almost the whole treatment. And this got to be almost 20 years ago. And she came back 3 weeks later, didn't make another appointment. And she goes, you treated me. And all of a sudden I remember this abuse that I went through when I was a child. And she said, look, I'm holding off on treatments until I get some mental health counseling. And I said, I think that's real wise. It was so, when you go back and you look at your points and you're like, I didn't even do anything that should have been psycho-emotional. And it's
You can't control.
doesn't matter if you get the right diagnosis, what comes out.
Yeah. It reminds me, actually, my dad has been a really hard soul my entire life. He was a Vietnam veteran and actually he had knee surgery, I think 3 years ago. And he has never really been the same because he woke up and he was in war. So I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but it's unlocked something where all this stuff is coming up actually.
Yeah.
To
And
anyone.
especially with vets, especially with the Vietnam vets and the Korean vets. They were sent somewhere. Came home. They weren't heroes, right? Yeah. They were kids when they went. They were men when they came back, but there was not an evolution there. It was just like a cold, hard thing.
No.
And then they're fighting people that don't know why. They're like, why are we killing these people? Yeah, all of those things are there. And it's real funny because I used to treat one years ago and it was very funny. He had a Korean girlfriend and she's, I don't know if I like this white guy playing with this stuff. He doesn't think about me because he would come home and have these flashbacks for a day or two. And it was him processing. And he even said it. He articulated it so well, like his PTSD. He didn't call it that ever. But I don't want to lose that thing that's keeping me alive. What is that? That's the fucking fight or flight response. That is PTSD in a nutshell. Is
this
the chart?
I'm glad you brought that up because sometimes how else can you connect the people to what they need, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's that thing. It's actually scary to work through the thing.
Well, because that's
no
it,
one's
right?
coming in to process their emotions with you.
Yeah, it's funny because the people that are savvy, the people that have done acupuncture before, and like I said, there's a bunch of different systems. There's one that really harps on that. Like I almost feel in some cases to a fault because we're not psychologists and we're not mental health care workers. It's part of our training, but it's not like, no, dude, you need to talk to somebody is normally what I end up saying. It's you can tell me whatever, but if you want to work through this, I'll give you a referral. And it's funny because we're playing with that survival instinct so much, right? And we talk about that as the kidney. That's fear, right? The kidneys, adrenal means on top of the kidneys. What gland gets taxed? What thing makes cortisol? What thing powers the adrenal gland? And I know I'm saying it like that intentionally, but that's the house of will in Chinese medicine. So yes, it's fear-based because that keeps us alive. Right now, we know the amygdala is involved in the brain and all of that as well. But it is that drive. It's that I'm going to get through this, or I'm going to fight my way out, or I'm going to take as many of these people out with me as I can. And that's really hard to put down, especially in the male incarnations, right? I can't. Why? Because that's who I am. If I let that go, I'm too soft. Somebody's going to kill me. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff.
It was a real weird aside there, but I think it was
got
a little dark. We're talking about numb.
Let's talk about what best practices or what not to do more so. When you were talking about increasing blood flow, I wanted to make sure to ask about cupping during cancer.
Yeah, this is a double-edged sword with any modality in cancer, right? I have people that come in, we have exercise with oxygen therapy at our office, and people are like, I want to do that. Oxygen kills cancer. And I'm like, some cancers, other cancers love oxygen, right? And I will always default to the person with the right title. And that's, you let the oncologist call me, I will explain to them what the process is. And if they say yes, I'm okay. And this is the same thing with cancer and cupping, right? In most cases, cancer oncologists, I haven't met somebody that said, don't do acupuncture,
Hmm.
but
Testament to how open we are to
yeah,
acupuncture now.
yeah. And I think the research is there. With cupping, we're not really talking about it too much with cancer. And we don't have research on it.
Yeah.
So, best case
Maybe eventually.
scenario, it probably is okay, but
Mhm.
don't take that chance. Talk with your oncologist. And in that case, maybe you don't want to just be doing it at home. Maybe you do want to have a licensed practitioner that has some experience.
Yeah.
And I want this to be accessible to everybody, but I also don't want anyone to get hurt.
I learned you weren't supposed to do it over your spine. So tell us about other places.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll give you the big contraindications. And over the spine is like a fast and loose one. And I think that's more of if somebody was going to do it really intense, you're probably going to just piss off a nerve. I don't think you do permanent damage, but why do that? I saw Jessica Simpson while she was pregnant at the nail salon, posted something on Instagram that she got cupping at the nail salon on her legs on points that we would consider contraindicated in pregnancy and acupuncture. In general, we don't have any data. This is another area we haven't researched. I would say don't do it while you're pregnant. Why? In Chinese medicine, we think a fetus is an accumulation of qi and blood. Cupping moves qi and blood. We don't want to do that.
Mhm.
Now, clearly, Jessica Simpson had the kid. Nothing was wrong. But once again, no research. Let's err on the side of caution. No one's going to use pregnant women as an experiment. No one should. Yeah, things
Never
like
had research on
vascular,
this.
deep vein thrombosis, or if you see a big vein right below the surface of the skin, don't put a cup there, right? You can do it somewhere else, not right there. And that might mean that for most people that have those, legs are out of play. If you want to treat the legs, do something on the low back and the hips. Open wounds, don't put it over an open wound. I saw one study that talked about acupuncture for eczema, cupping for eczema. It did not put the cups on the sites of eczema. It did some systemic stuff. So once again, like if we had it on the elbow or an area that's prone to getting it, doing something on the neck and shoulder to increase circulation down the arm is the thought there. So no open wounds, no things on the surface of the skin. The spine is one of those ones that they're worried that if you do it very intensely, that you would upset the root of the nerve. Clinically, I haven't seen that. When we do sliding cupping with the glass jars, sometimes we get lazy and we'll pull one across the spine just quickly. We don't leave it there. Nothing bad ever happens. It's safe. But yeah, at home, not directly on the spine. It really likes to hold into like flat muscles. It sticks best there.
Why do you slide versus leave it in one place?
So the idea here is, you can put a bunch of cups on and cover an area, but a sliding cupping, and it works itself so well for the back, put some oil down and I can run the whole length of that erector muscle going from all the way from the trap all the way down to the hips, right? Oh God, it's like a very intense massage, right? So it's a little bit gua sha scraping because of the way it is, but you also get that cupping effect. So you're pushing the tissue down, you're pulling it up, and then you're pushing it back down as it slides under the cup. So you're getting 3 points of stimulation. Right. So it's very intense when we do it in the clinic. And even then, sometimes I have to put the cups on very light to be able to get the cup to move or to make it tolerable for the patient. And that's the same thing, right? These silicone cups I sent you, they have a nice little handle on them. You're not able to put them on too tight. So once again, safety first. I'm pretty sure people that are using that style are not going to hurt themselves, but that handle works really well for the sliding technique. You use olive oil, use coconut oil, use whatever you have at home, or we talk a whole bunch about different liniments and things that you can buy online. Hell, Bengay will work if you want to use that. But you put that down and you pull one hand in the opposite direction of that muscle and you slide with the other. And it's a different sensation. Like I said, it's massage, it's gua sha, it's cupping, it's 3 things at once. And it's very intense, but it's great to get things really ripped up quickly. Ripped up doesn't sound so good when we're talking about treating someone, but those workout fiends would love that. Oh, God, I'm going to go get ripped up.
Totally. And doing 3 things at once really speaks to my efficiency core.
Yeah, the biohacking community.
Okay, we covered a ton. We meant to talk about cupping. We got a sideline acupuncture, which was important.
I think this was a great conversation.
It was perfect. And there's something I want to underline that I think is a good summary statement. And you say in your book, one factor always contributes to achieving positive results faster. There's this common denominator essentially in people who are achieving positive results. What do you say about that?
Jesus, I wrote this book like a year ago.
Doing it every day. It was consistent.
Consistency. Yeah.
Listen,
I
all the
it's fun.
little
I knew
things.
you were going there too. And that speaks to the practice itself. You get better the more you do it. Certainly with consistency, this is a therapy, right? So it's not every day, but
Right,
it's
right.
as your body can tolerate the area, right? You could cup your body every day, but not in the same spots. You want to let
Yeah.
those bruises clean up a little bit. But a therapy is not a one and done thing. So doing it with some regularity is going to be, that's what I'm speaking of.
Yeah, it was essentially at the beginning of the book you were talking about people who have the best results aren't just relying on their in-office treatments. They're
Yeah.
doing more to support themselves at home.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I want to teach you about this amazing thing that
Yeah.
not everyone knows about, but it's this lost art that I didn't even realize was so pervasive in so many cultures.
Over 5,000 years old. Yeah,
And
it's been everywhere.
one of my tenets with this podcast, there's a few things. It's always, there's so much opportunity. I truly never think you're out of options for literally anything. That's kind
No.
of one of my
Yeah.
thoughts. And the other one is that there's a lot of opportunities for self-healing. And I think personally, that's how we change the medical system is that there's a time and a place to have your expert all the time. And maybe you need that person and there's all these learning, like every experience is a success, according to Louise Hay. And it's one of my favorite quotes, but there's a lot of opportunities to support yourself in between appointments on your own. And so it's I'm a huge fan of modalities to help you heal yourself. And this essentially is a tool for faster healing is how I look at it.
Yeah. And you can call it like they call it lifestyle medicine, self-care, whatever. But the more things you're doing in between your appointments, whether that's just your every 6 months checkup, which is funny, right? You get that piece of paper that says, oh, all the labs are in normal order. You must be very healthy. And you'll be dying on the inside and they don't know. But doing those things, being more in tune with how your body functions and, oh, I ate this and that didn't work for me. And oh, you know what? I tried this. And cupping is one of those things that, like, with a little bit of money, you buy the book if you want. Don't watch a YouTube video. I really just want people doing good work and taking care of themselves. And then you become your own advocate. You become your best representative of yourself. And let's face it, MDs, all the healthcare professionals know that everybody's got a little rectangle in their pocket that's smarter than anybody on the planet. And we have access to that now. We're starting to use that. Now we're not only just starting to use it to start fights on social media, but we're like double checking things and fact checking and going, oh, I found out about this. Is that any good? Okay, let me read this website. Oh, this one seems biased. Let me check over here. So we can start to empower ourselves, but that doesn't mean just dump the baby out with the bathwater. So a lot of these traditional practices, and I think in the next few years, we're going to see more and more. We talk about shamanisms as we talk about psychedelics. We talk about that cultural ancestral roots there. And look, oh God, modern research is showing, yes, these things happen, right? So we had a lot of knowledge throughout history and we can bring it back. We can redefine it. We can measure it now. And that doesn't devalue it. And that's why I think cupping is one of these modalities that needs to go back into families and into homes because it's so accessible. It's so easy to use and it's everybody's culture.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. I think this is a fun conversation.
We went long, didn't we? I'm sorry about that.
No, I had time. I should have stopped and asked you if you had time, but
no, I'm good. I'm good.
We got distracted by the acupuncture and here we are talking about cupping.
Well,
and I think we summarized it well. So where can people find you online?
Charm City Integrative, TIVE.com is my clinic's website, but you can find out all about me. You can find links to the book. You can find links to my podcast. You can book me for lectures, those kind of things too. Yeah, I love talking about this. I just want to share what I know and make sure people have the information.
The relatable acupuncturist. That's one of my takeaways from our conversation is, oh, I would just like to learn this from you because
we'll see. We'll see. Maybe there'll be a school in the future.
Maybe. Thank you so much for coming on today. I see you maybe have your own show too called Irreverent Health, which is the perfect name for you.
Yeah. And that one started me and my buddy Matt. We're just having these conversations in the back of a business group and people would come over and just listen. And then eventually somebody said, you guys should record this. And then COVID hit and we're like, all right, let's start recording this. Yeah, I say stuff that's even more off the cuff than I did here. Normally, like I haven't even reached for the whiskey glass.
I feel like we had a real Joe Rogan experience.
I'm not pro Joe Rogan. I'm not anti Joe Rogan. I like some of his guests, but like
Yeah.
some of them, I'm like, no, that guy is a fascist. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, that's fascism. No, he's describing fascism. It's like, we should all be against that, Joe.
I don't listen to enough of him to catch them.
Every once in a while, I'm like, that guy's crazy. Why did you have him on? Like, no, we know he's insane.
I guess that's the why, right? Like
Exactly. He loves it because he's making more money.
Good. Thanks so much for coming on today.
I had so much fun.
Sharing your passion of cupping and honestly just helping people heal themselves. I'm glad the Divine Intervention sent you the acupuncture school card. How hilarious. And I feel more inspired than I really expected to. So today, for the first time, I was like, I think I know what my 10-year goals are. And then I look at retirement. I'm like, what would I like to do in retirement? Because this is my personality. It wouldn't be that I'm just doing whatever people do in retirement.
Yeah.
Maybe in retirement, I could do some acupuncture.
When I was in school, the program was Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday. It was specifically written for people changing careers.
No.
The average age of a student was 35. I started at 21.
Bring that average up a little.
But that's the thing. We had a 76-year-old in our program.
Oh, yeah.
So I was
Those are
bringing the
stories
average down.
Yeah. The stories that I like personally is you can reinvent yourself at any age. And what else I'm saying is like, oh, here is this ancient modality that is so powerful that has a lot of things in it that I love, like pattern recognition, et cetera.
Yeah.
Right. And, get to the root of the unlayering of things.
We could have done a whole episode on Taoism and its pre-Taoist roots, which you read books on Chinese shamanism and you're like, oh, wow, this sounds like Native American culture.
And I'm not smart enough to even know what Tao is, but it's
You're describing it perfectly. The Tao that can be named is not the true Tao.
okay. Perfect.
So yeah. All right,
episode for another
we're
time.
gonna ramble if you leave me on here and you don't hang up
so
on
much
me.
for coming on today.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thanks for the beard. This is great. The cupping book available everywhere.
I wanna heal these bones, but they just keep breaking.